Okay, here we go. Today we're going to talk about square roots and irrational numbers. So if you have a printer, make sure you print it off the notes so you can fill them out as we go along. If you don't have a printer, just get a piece of blank paper and try to copy down as much as you can. Pause it as we go. Having notes will really help you as we go through this section and give you stuff to refer back to. This section is going to be really important as we learn Pythagorean theorem over the next couple days. So again, fill it out, write it out, do what you need to do to get your notes. Okay, so first thing we have to talk about, it says when you multiply an integer times itself, that's called squaring it, the result is what's called a perfect square. So for example, if we have the number 1, if we do 1 times 1, that gives us 1. So the integer is 1, and when you square it, it's 1. Okay, with 2, that means 2 times 2, and I'll write that out. So 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, that's how we're getting these numbers. It's not 3 times 2, it's 3 times itself. So 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. We should know these from our times tables. 7 times 7 is 49, 8 times 8 is 64, 81, and 100. These are ones that we should all be really familiar with just because they're times tables. Over here might be a little bit more difficult, but we're going to write them out. So 11 squared is 121, 12 squared is 144, 13 squared is 169, then 196, 225, 16 squared is 256, and then we go to 289, 324, 361, and 400. Okay, you do not have to memorize these right now. We're going to be able to use our chart on our homework and stuff, so don't freak out about having them memorized. Okay, but make sure you do have this list written down because it's going to make it way easier. So when you're asked, like this says, simplify each square root. So when you have something like this where it says the square root of 64, that is asking you what number, when you square it, gives you 64. So if we were to look back here on our chart, right, what number times itself is 64? And that's 8. Because 8 times 8 is 64. Okay, over here on number, I guess they're not numbered, the square root of 100, what number times itself is 100? And that's 10. 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, a common mistake that people make is they want to write 10 squared. 10 squared is not the square root of 100. 10 squared is 100. Right? So don't make sure you're not writing that squared sign, you're just writing the number. Okay, so the square root of 100 is 10. On the next one, the square root of 81, if we were to look at our chart, it would be 9. And then the square root of 169, look over here on your chart, would be 13. Okay, so this is all this means. When it says simplify each square root, it's just what number times itself gives you the number that's inside what's called our radical sign or our square root. Okay, the next part. It says find 2 consecutive whole numbers that each number is in between. Okay, so vocabulary really quick. Consecutive, I'm trying to make this closer. Consecutive means in a row. Okay, so like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that kind of thing. Okay, and then whole numbers are just numbers that don't have decimals. So, for example, the square root of 70, okay? I'm actually going to draw a little number line here to kind of explain this. So, if I have 7, 8, 9, and 10 on my number line, okay? Another way of writing 7 would be the square root of 49 because these two are the exact same. The square root of 49 is 7. On 8, the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 81 is 9. And the square root of 100 is 10. So the square root of 49 is the exact same thing as 7. So when it asks you to find two consecutive whole numbers that each number is in between, what you want to do, so like this one, the square root of 70. Well, here's the square root of 64. Here's the square root of 81. So the square root of 70 would have to go somewhere in between these two. So when it asks you for the two whole numbers in a row that each one is in between, this is kind of what you need to look at. So the square root of 70 is in between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81, which are 8 and 9. So all I have to write on my paper is 8 and 9. Okay, and you actually don't even have to write out a number line every time. So like, look at this. The square root of 70, if I'm to come over here and look at my chart, 70 would come in between, look, 64 and 81, which are 8 and 9. So look at this one, the square root of 190. Okay, I'm looking, well, which one does it come in between? It comes in between 169 and 196, which are 13 and 14. So those are, my two consecutive in a row whole numbers. And then the square root of 240. Looking over here at my little chart, okay, 240 would come in between 225 and 256, which are 15 and 16. So those are my two consecutive whole numbers that this would be in between. So if I were to type this into my calculator, and actually I will to show you, okay, I can guess that the number is going to be something in between 15 and 16. So on my calculator, if I were to type in 240 and then take the square root of it, look, it's 15.49, which is in between 15 and 16. Okay, or over here, the square root of 190 is in between, it's 13.78. That's in between 13 and 14. So it's just a way to kind of estimate what that number is going to be. Okay, find the length of the side of a square with the given area. So we have spent a significant amount of time talking about geometry. So what we know about a square, let's look at that, okay, is that it has 4 right angles, and then it should have 4 congruent sides. So that means 4 congruent sides, right? That if this side is 5, this is also 5. So if we were to find the area of a square, it would be 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, what if I had a smaller one? That's 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Anytime you have a square, okay, with a whole number as the length of the side, the answer is always going to be a perfect square number, right? Because if it's a square, the definition is that these two sides are the same. So if we had a square that had an area of 49, okay, what we can figure out is that it has to have sides of 7, because 7 times 7 is 49. So this would be 7 kilometers. Okay, what if this square had an area of 81 meters squared? Well, each side would have to be 9 meters, because 9 times 9 is 81. Or over here, if it's 121, okay, so we're looking back on our chart. Oh, each of the sides must be 11 feet, because 11 times 11 is 121.